You are watching Rarely Reserved, a Star Wars Shatterpoint experience. I am Charles, also known as Omnis, and I am here with the most epic of droid queens. Sin, how is the day treating you?
Pretty good, I think. Well, I don't want to get into it, but I'm here now. I'm good. I'm excited to talk Shatterpoint.
Wonderful. Yes, I am excited as well. Been working on the videos. I just want to shout out again. I'm just so happy that Dylan, Poos, and Scott all made the trek to come play with us last weekend. That was a blast. And I'm still riding that high just a little bit, I'm still on it. But the weekend has passed. We need to talk about the current puck. What are we talking about today?
So today's puck is a little bit unusual. I was really inspired by your story last week and how personal and awesome it was. And so it got me thinking about my childhood connections to Star Wars. And my actual very first Star Wars experience was not watching the Star Wars movies. That actually happened later. My first Star Wars experience was when I was about 7 or 8, and I played the original Lego Star Wars video game for the Xbox. And so the puck today isn't necessarily a character, it's the original Lego Star Wars video game for the Xbox, because that is my, because thinking back on what does Star Wars mean? I have these distinct memories of being kind of a teenager, maybe a preteen teenager, and actually watching the prequel movies for the first time and being that's not how that happened, because I had watched them via Lego Star Wars, which omits or changes a lot of Star Wars. It keeps the general stuff, but a lot of it's very different, and some scenes are missing entirely or are very different, shall we say. And so I do remember having these moments watching the prequels. They're that character was so nice in Lego Star Wars. What are they doing? But probably my most fond memories of Lego Star Wars as a wee lass were kind of one, getting to be a droid, because after you played through a I don't know what they called them, but level, you could replay the level with any of the characters you'd unlocked. So of course I played every level to completion, because I was a completionist even as a 7-year-old, and then would play it again as a droid. And if I could manage to play the whole level as a droidica, I would, because that was my favorite droid to play. But they couldn't do certain things because they're a roly-poly, so I would have to switch. But so being me, very young, playing through Lego Star Wars just so that I could walk around every episode, or I'll walk around. I don't know why I was obsessed with this as a 7-year-old, but the little what are they called? The little they're the tiny droids that are maintenance droids, and they have a disc hat for a head. A disproportionately large head that looks like a disc, and I'm forgetting what they're called, but they have one big eye. And they're small. And so I loved being that little guy just walking around, because in the levels, the characters react to you based on who you are. And so, but no one cares about little droid, service droid guy, so you could just kind of saunter through every level as this little servitor droid thing. But so I have these super fond memories of it, but probably the memory that sticks in my head the most, emotionally speaking, I suppose, was this might have been a bit when I was a little bit older, but the pod racing part of Lego Star Wars, because I played that game with my little sisters, and it was a point of pride for young me that I was the only one who could successfully do the pod race. I think it was just a little too much dexterity checks for my younger siblings, but I just had these really fond memories of sitting, you know, with both my little sisters next to me and them like cheering me on in the pod race, trying to get through all these barriers. And I can't remember if that was the original Star Wars Lego or if it was the next one that came, like when they redid it. But like, I just have a lot of fond Lego Star Wars Lego Star Wars video game related memories. And so thinking about it makes me think about just like my little sisters, and like those were really some of my fondest memories with them. And also them yelling at me that we can't be a droid in every level. Doesn't make sense. They wanted to be Padme or whatever. Like they were more into being the girl characters. And I get that. I was too, but I just wanted to be a droid all the time. And, cause there was like also the cantina you could hang out at in between levels. And we would just like walk around and like, I don't know. We were like playing like Barbie's Dream House, but with Lego characters in the middle of Lego Star Wars. So I will always look back fondly on it, and it will always accidentally screw with my memory of what actually happened in Star Wars because I played it in Lego Star Wars first. So that's the real canon to me, you know?
Oh, yeah, this is quite a learning experience. So first off, the droid that you're talking about, are you talking about the buzz droids? Like the ones that end up all over Anakin's ship, or Obi's ship in Revenge of the Sith, that like Anakin's like, target the eye or whatever. Is that the same thing, or are we thinking of a different droid?
I'm gonna look it up because I'm like, I need to know. 1 second, please hold.
Yeah, I'm certainly not an expert on all of the droid names. And I think it was a droid that was not in Star Wars Minis by Wizards of the Coast, so I may not remember every detail. But I had never considered until just now that there might be people's experience with Star Wars that actually started with something like Lego Star Wars or a video game. And it's interesting. Like on one hand, there's a part of me that's like horrifically offended, where it's like, how dare Lego Star Wars be the beginning point? Like, I thought there was no wrong answer to where you start, but like maybe you found it. But on the other side, as someone who also grew up with video games and like the, you know, kind of like one of the first eras of video games becoming super popular, there's also a part of me that's like, this is just another medium for storytelling and how people absorb that sort of information. So like, is it really that weird? I just had never really considered it. I don't know what this says about me. I'm not sure I've ever played all the way through a Lego Star Wars game. I think that's been something that I've played at least a little bit with other people. Like when I was dating people who had kids, I remember a few instances of playing Lego Star Wars with kids. But I don't know if I ever like sat down and just played like a Lego game all the way through. But I am certainly imagining you watching Star Wars and being like, wait a second, at this point, they build a speeder in this alleyway out of like the various parts and stuff that are in the alley. That's not what's happening right now. Aren't you supposed to be building something?
Well, they also just like, they had to basically change all of Star Wars to fit into like levels with a boss at the end where you had to, you know, make little puzzles in between. But the other thing is Lego Star Wars has no talking. So all of the storytelling is environmental or like gesture based, I guess. And so a lot of things I made up reasons why it was happening and then come to find out that's not at all what's happening. Was a little jarring, but the other droid that I like being was actually the Gonk, which is why I like Gonk droids. I know Matt really likes them from or the original Star Wars series, but I actually didn't. I mean, I guess I was like conceptually aware that Gonks must have been in the original trilogy, but I knew them from Lego Star Wars, okay? And in Lego Star Wars, they're also ignored by all the enemies, and they're really slow, but they make like satisfying noises, so you can kind of just shuffle around the whole level and people ignore you, and you can just kind of get into these secret spots. But Lego Star Wars rocks. And like, I will replay those games as an adult, because and they eventually did the original trilogy as Lego Star Wars, which I don't want to break your heart, but I think I did play that before I watched the original trilogy as well. Uh, because I do remember a lot of things being when they meet Lando in the original trilogy and they there's not a lot, they don't spend a lot of time hanging out in the city, but they do in Lego Star Wars. So when I watched the movie and they didn't there was no scavenger hunt in Cloud City, or is that what it's called? I don't remember, but
that's correct.
Oh, okay, good. I was like, what's happening? They just go to a room and where's the exploration scenes in this? There's nothing. So, yeah, it was, it is a trip trying to having played through that multiple times before ever seeing the movie that it's based on. But yeah, very fond memories for me.
So I will tell you, so there was something I was considering talking about in this, but I think this topic is already getting long enough. You've already inspired my next puck right now. I'm not going to spoil what it is, but I just want to tell everybody, including you right now, this has inspired the puck for next week when we get there. So stay tuned for more is what I'm saying. But I think it's funny that what you're describing is kind of like the inverse of someone who reads books like Game of Thrones and they have their vision for how the characters look. And then they watch the movie or watch the show or, whatever. And you're now grappling with well, this is not what I envisioned in my head. You have this kind of different version of it, right? Where you're envisioning more time spent in certain areas and there might be bosses and stuff that, and I can't imagine you're the only one. There's got to be other people who started with some of these video games and even I'm imagining it would not be crazy for someone to have started Star Wars with Knights of the Old Republic, right? It was just an epically popular game and just a really good game in general in when it came out. I forget, early 2000s, something like that. Maybe, yeah, something in that range. And someone who maybe potentially plays that game because one of their parents got the game or something. And then they're like, yeah, I want to play it, but maybe hasn't watched the movies yet or something. I mean, possible, probably not very many, but interesting puck. I like this. We're learning about one another's Star Wars history.
Yes. It's an interesting time to think about of when I was very little and didn't know anything about anything. And clearly my parents didn't care about the sanctity of Star Wars, that they wanted to preserve my memories of the game correctly, because they were just like, yeah, here you go. I don't even think they got it for me. I think that when one of our cousins was staying with us, he left it there, just left Lego Star Wars, and we were like, okay, game to play. So it wasn't even an intentional thing that happened. It was just oh, okay, I don't know what Star Wars is, but I like Legos. So, and then it wasn't until years and years later that I saw the movies that this game was based on. So I don't even remember what the impetus for me to actually watch Star Wars was, because little me didn't know that they were based on a movie. It was just a game. So I'm trying to think what actually made me realize it was a movie. I don't know. When did that happen? Not totally sure.
Yeah, I will say an adjacent story is after one of our prior episodes, and I was wondering, when did I first watch Star Wars, and maybe what was some of my initial reactions? I just don't remember. I remember my earliest Star Wars memories are playing with the toys, not actually I don't have the distinct memory of watching Empire Strikes Back. I don't remember a point where I didn't know that Vader was Luke's father. Spoiler alert. I don't remember that being a surprise to me. I don't have a memory that far back that's oh, I didn't know that until watching it. So I'd asked my brother, if he remembered, because he was the one super into Star Wars, and he couldn't quite remember. I think he was going to think about it and see what he would come to, but he did say that he was he remembers being annoyed that he thinks that our mom let me watch them without him. Like the first time he wasn't included. And so there was something, I don't know if it like hit TV or we rented it or something while he was out. And like, then my first Star Wars watch, he wasn't there, but he remembered something about being annoyed that he wasn't there for the first watch. So.
That is interesting. Yeah, I'll spend some time thinking about whenever. I mean, I know the first time I first saw the actual original trilogy because that wasn't that long ago. But I'll try to think back to when I originally saw the prequels. I don't know. Maybe I'll unlock some core memory.
All right. Well, I think we can move on to our main topic, and we're back to doing some psychology and. Just whatever Omnis ends up watching on YouTube and how it inspires and makes me think about what I do in Shatterpoint. But the basic concept is in relation to the types of gaming experiences that different games are designed to achieve, and then the types of players that games are kind of designed to attract or like make them enjoy the experience. So I wanted to start off talking about types of game experiences. And so there was 4. This is not my list. This is something that I pulled from something else. And I'm not trying to add to it or subtract from it. I'm just thinking about how it relates to Shatterpoint, which I thought would be an interesting topic. And so the first off, so there's competition experience, which is overcoming, like the joy of the game comes from overcoming an opponent. And so obviously that one's pretty self-explanatory. And then there is the kind of chance enjoyment. So this could be something like slot machines or just in general dice games. And then there are vertigo experience, which I don't know why it's called that, but it's the things that get you into that very intense concentration or going into the zone in the game that you're playing. And then there is make-believe experiences where part of the joy of the game is that you get to do things that you wouldn't normally be able to do in real life. And so before we kind of like dig into what I was thinking about this, Sin, do you have any thoughts on this initial list? Does it feel complete? Anything on the Sin droid circuitry?
My droid circuitry. It takes me a minute to do my calculations. I'm not running at full speed right now, but I can see how these would kind of encompass a lot of game things. I think we'll talk through them and decide if they have everything in them or if we're gonna declare a couple of missing points.
Yeah. So my first thought when I saw this list of 4 primary game experiences, I thought it was really interesting that I felt like Shatterpoint covers all 4. Potentially in like a very significant way, right? It is usually a one-on-one game. Part of the joy is overcoming the challenge of your opponent. It also has random elements. It's not chess, right? It has dice rolls. So there is a dice excitement. You know, the part of you that loves gambling still gets some of that. We're like, maybe I could have won this game if I just rolled one more success. You still get that sort of, intensity. It also has the vertigo experience, right? Like I definitely get into the zone and I'm like, how do I solve this situation? I need to flip 2 points or that absolutely happens like somewhat regularly for me. And then it also encompasses make-believe, right? I to a certain extent, it's not like the same as a role-playing game, but I'm still getting to carry out stuff where jetpacking Mandalorians and force-pushing Sith Lords and stuff. And so that was one of my first thoughts when I saw this list. I was like, oh, no wonder a game like Shatterpoint or, really any of the miniatures games that I've played are such a special experience is because they do kind of hit on all of these and they have all 4 appeal to me. But I'm also was thinking about it like, oh, maybe someone plays this for 2 out of 4 of them and not all 4 matter. But maybe the reason why I love this stuff so much is that it hits on all of the notes. Do you have any thoughts to add there?
Yeah, I think different minis games hit different points more strongly than others. But I do think that you're right. Shatterpoint kind of has maybe a more even distribution between the four, whereas like maybe MCP would lean a little bit more into chance because the dice are a little more dicey. But yeah, I think you're right. I think that of the four quadrants, Shatterpoint does a good job at encompassing them all.
There's also an interesting element of, say, in like the struggle system, right, where the competition part of you that wants to overcome your opponent, you're not exactly playing a best 2 out of 3, but even when you lose, you have a chance to be like, well, I still got to struggle off of you, you know? And so there's a little bit of that there. But while we're on this, do you get the Vertigo experience? Like, is it something where you have been playing any of the games, whether we're talking about Warhammer or MCP or Shatterpoint or Age of Sigmar? Do you feel like you've hit that I entered like a zone where you're like everything else is filtered out? You're like, how do I do this thing in the moment? Do you get that? And is it a part of the gaming experience that you enjoy?
Good question. Probably, I think that's something that Shatterpoint can give someone. I don't know if I have too much ADHD to lock into that all the time, but it's certainly there. I wouldn't say it's something I can get into every time. I would say I have like strong moments of it, but like being totally locked in, not always, but I will be locked into the story, but I might not be locked into the competitive what's going on. I'm a little like, I'll zero in on how thematic a moment is, or like how cool of a game changer the moment is, but zeroing in on the game as a whole, or zeroing in on it as a competitive thing is a little beyond me usually.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to cover the types of players so that we can kind of just talk about all of this stuff, because I think it's important to get this out for the listeners. So, what I was watching was also talking about 4 types of players. And so there's the killer, which is kind of self-explanatory. It's the person who's wants to play to compete with other people. And then there is the explorer, who's really is about discovering things and experiencing like the full breadth. And then there's the socializer, who's there for the social interaction elements, and that could be with players or that could be with some sort of gaming AI, but it's primarily about some sort of social experience. And then there is the achiever, which is the person it's about leveling up, going up ranks, that sort of thing. And before I got heavily into miniatures games, I would have described myself as an achiever gamer more than anything else. I liked classic RPGs, very clear leveling up. And so, but anyway, these are the kind of 4 players. Do you have any thoughts before we break it down further?
I'm just thinking about different people and how I would put them into categories of these little, I don't want to say stereotypes, but designations.
Yeah. So again, I was also thinking about how this applies to Shatterpoint, right? And obviously, killer kind of makes obvious sense, right? There's people that the whole goal, all of their joy comes from, or most of their joy comes from just overcoming opponents, right? And beating people in this one-on-one environment. And then I was like, well, my first thought was, does Shatterpoint have an exploration aspect? Because it's not like a video game, right? Where you're exploring all parts of the world. Like I remember playing Star Wars Galaxies and like exploring planets with my Star Wars character. And obviously you don't have that with Shatterpoint, but there's list exploration, right? And I was like, maybe this applies to me maybe more than I thought it did initially, where I'm like, I want to try out all the different characters and see what lists work together. And there's this like breadth of different ways that you can build lists and different ways that you can set up terrain. And like, I get really excited about doing different things with the tables. So there is, I think, I don't know if it's under the classic definition of the explorer type player, but I think that definitely applies to Shatterpoint, at least in that sense. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. Though the weirder one for me, because I think Killer and Socializer both make sense that this game can hit for both of those notes, because you do get a social experience out of this as well. There's a reason why we like it more than just playing, World of Warcraft or something, right? Something that's, you're directly interacting with people. The Achiever one I thought was kind of weird. It was like, one, it's probably the one I connect with the most, but you don't instinctively, like the game in itself doesn't really have a level up system or a ranking system. And so it's interesting that to me that to a certain extent, Longshanks provides some of that for people, right? We're like, oh, I want to get badges with this particular character or be on the leaderboard for this particular primary and that sort of thing. Where outside of that, really all there is like ranks in the sense of like, I would like to have top 4 at a tournament. I'd like to have top table. I'd like to have won a tournament. So it was just interesting to me how Longshanks actually probably helps that type of player enjoy this game even more. What are you thinking?
I think for Achiever, I honestly think like you're right. That's the kind of the player that you are. But I was thinking like Achiever is less of a thing that comes externally from like Longshanks or the game itself, but more like I think one of your, at least it was last year, main goals was to play all of the characters that are in the game, and I feel that leans into Achiever a lot, but also you had kind of these side goals of finding good lists for every character. And I feel like that's super, very Achiever-esque of like, this isn't going to show up in Longshanks or anything, but like thinking to yourself, like, I'm going to make a good functioning and hopefully what I think of as a competitive list for every character. To me, that sounds like perfect achievement unlocked stacking in a video game. It's just not hard coded into the game at all. But like, because I think of course, we love the social aspect of it. I would put you as very high achiever explorer, but they go kind of hand in hand where your exploration is in the search of an achievement of like, through exploring every character, I'm going to achieve a sense of completion about this. And then I'm going to share it with my friends, and then I'm going to crush them with it. So I'm going to hit all 4.
Yeah, because I think I think you're right. I had not really considered that aspect where I sort of create my own achievement milestones in the way that, say, like Lego Star Wars or a lot of games I know will do stuff where you're like, have you beaten this level with all of the different possible characters, right? Where like, have you beat level A with all of these different options? And some of them are harder than others. And where like, to a certain extent, I kind of create that for myself, right? That's like, okay, I want to play this particular primary and I want to like win with it, right? Like, cause I forget there was a game. I can't remember if this was an MCP experience or a Shatterpoint experience, but I think it was Shatterpoint, but I remember having so many things that I wanted to try at a particular time that I jammed too much shit together. And then I really didn't enjoy that particular gaming day, where it was just because I don't remember if I tried to do too many things at the same time or what it was exactly. But I remembered I'm like, no. Like if I actually want to try everything, I need to have a good experience with each of those things and not just force myself to play 3 things that I haven't played, but build a list, like pick something and go, I want to build the best possible list I can for this specific model, and then leave the rest to be flexible and not try to shove in too many things that were kind of on my list to try, if that makes sense. So I do think you're right that I may understand my own brain better than I realize and create my own achievements. Yeah,
and I think that's a really positive thing in any sort of game, especially ones that don't have inherent achievements, is even if you're not doing it consciously, like you weren't like thinking about, I'm going to create structured level of achievement for myself, but like creating goals. If you're someone who values achievement as a part of gameplay, creating goals for yourself that are going to add to your overall enjoyment of the game. So I really liked your goal. I think I am less of an achiever, I guess, as a game player type. So I wasn't something I was like, it was something I enjoyed watching you do. We'll say that.
Fair. But yeah, obviously these were intended for video games, so it doesn't have things like the hobby aspect, right? Which you could be working in as well. And so you're more than welcome to like weave that into any of this stuff. Like I wouldn't like, you could say achiever is, someone who's like just wants to own everything. And to a certain extent, I am trying to like get all of my shit painted. And I'm like not too far off, but I did kind of start sliding on that a little bit. But one thought that I had was, I'm like, okay, so types of players has a socializer, right? And so in the gaming world, this would be someone who would like say Animal Crossing, where it's this more like intimate social experience, not necessarily anything that like directly requires exploring or, getting specific achievements or beating other players. You're just kind of like building up your farm and shit, and you interact with other farmers and that sort of thing. And you like that aspect of it. But then there wasn't a gaming experience that was like entirely social. And I thought that was kind of interesting. And maybe that just comes from like when those game experiences were written, that the socializer game feels like it's evolved somewhat more recently and has been growing in popularity since then.
Yeah, games that are just purely social in nature. I would think Jackbox is probably the game that I can think of that's the most like, it doesn't have really anything of any of the other types really besides socializing. But yeah. But I think that part of gaming is really important to both of us in slightly different ways, I guess. But if we had to pick the great equalizer between the two of us, it would be the social aspect of gaming.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. That's certainly something that we both like hit on. And part of why I was like, I think we would podcast well together. We both like the social aspect of these games. Like there was something fun. And maybe it was because when I played Magic, people didn't talk to each other as much, like at events. Like when I grew up as kids, we did it, but not so much when I like started doing some events and stuff up here. Everybody was very, very quiet during the games. But when I started getting into miniatures games, and we would like make more jokes at each other throughout the game. And I like really savored that part of it, the kind of the trolling and the taunting and, yeah, just like in a different way, like when you're playing a video game, right? You never hear the computer go like, oh God, or, like, fucking wrecked you, didn't I? And you get some of that in person, which I think is an amplifier for both of us.
Yeah, I agree. I think I learned how to play minis games from someone who would have zero objections to being referred to as a killer as a player and had probably very little to no care for any of the other parts of miniature gaming. The hobby aspect, they never painted anything ever, still don't. The social aspect, they were here to hunt people down. But, so when I learned minis gaming, it was very, it was a sink or swim experience. I don't want to say it crushed the spirit out of me, but it might have a little bit. But it wasn't until we went to our first like tournament together, and then I kind of experienced the other facets of minis gaming that I was like, oh, okay, this is a lot more my pace now. I was okay. So like, I definitely know people who fit into all these different categories, but I think they do work best together. Like especially like what I think of the minis triforce of people who are really into the game, like gameplay, people who are really into the hobby and then the people who are into like the lore of the thing, you know, like for us, the Star Wars lore. So
it's funny, before you actually said Star Wars lore, I was thinking social, and that's like the triforce of like hobbying, playing, socializing. And then I was like, oh yeah, it probably actually is the love of the thing. But I think that's actually, I mean, I would say lore is probably more important to me than the hobby aspect, but I would say that I probably put the social aspect and like the gameplay aspect above the importance of lore. But, I totally had a thing that I was going to say, and then you made me think of something else. I wanted to, I was just thinking about how all of these things end up like weaving together into the experience. And well, you were talking about the convention experience, and I definitely like when I started doing conventions for War Machine, I was 100% because I was a killer, not for social, right? Like, honestly, even as much of an extrovert as I am, the idea of flying to another state, which I had barely ever done in my life before wargaming conventions, I had flown like twice or something. And so suddenly being like, I'm going to fly across the country to do tournaments. And I was very nervous about meeting people and not knowing what it was going to be like being at a convention where I really didn't know anyone. But you start hearing right away, you're like, oh, you come to these initially for the gaming. You end up coming back because of the people, the community, the social experience. And it was a little bit of like, no, I'm here for gaming. But now, years later, I'm like, oh no, it's as much like just wanting to be around everybody and, you know, seeing the people you don't get to see all the time. And there's something special about being at a convention and you're like, everybody's kind of celebrating the same things together, which is special. So I do think that you can start off being really focused on one of the things and then grow to love the other things. But, that's certainly a challenge. But yeah, I definitely like look forward to seeing people at events. And I've had conventions where I've only played MCP or Shatterpoint like a couple of times. And I've had War Machine events where I mostly hung out and drank with people and I played like one tournament on one particular day, or like maybe played like 5 games the whole weekend, something like that. So yeah, it definitely shifts your point of view at all. I imagine, so I guess a question for you is how much of an importance is the competition killer side? Because those clearly go hand in hand. How important is that to you? Because we're all playing this for like a degree of dopamine hits, right? And I know that you're probably like a painter first and foremost, and like you want to like put your joy on the table and also have the social experience. But I feel like there's a little bit of killer hidden deep down in you where you would like to crush some fools for their crimes against the separatist army.
Well, I mean, if I want to be very real and open and honest, then I really don't have a like big drive to win. I don't have a killer instinct in me, really. And, I'm in it for the good time and not the winning time. But that being said, I know that is an important aspect of it to a lot of minis gamers, at least at like middling ranking, if not the most important thing. And so I don't ever want to feel like I am pulling down someone else's good time by just dinking around like a moron. So I do try actively to be better at the game in the hopes that like weirdly it wraps around and makes my social experience better, because like if I'm playing against you and you're feeling like every time I place in I'm just teaching, this is ridiculous, I don't want to do a teaching game anymore, and then you kind of get frustrated and then it just is like, well, I don't want to play this in anymore, and it's like, well, I'm losing out on fun social experiences because I'm not improving at this game. And so, and I know, and every minis gamer and every gamer at some point has said something similar to me of, I love a nail biter game. I like being close and I want to fight the whole time. And to me, I don't care, but I get secondary enjoyment off of other people's enjoyment. So if me being better and being on the cusp of absolutely crushing you makes you have a better time, then I'm going to fight for that. I'm going to claw and bite at your heels if that means we're both having a better time. So, do I have a killer instinct? No. Do I feign one in order for us both to have a better time? Abso-fucking-lutely.
So I will say, obviously, I like recruiting to people to the game. I take a lot of pride in when, there's like a good positive community, and like Scott had commented on like how much he was enjoying our community. And that meant a lot to me, when he said that. But for example, you were a person, I think it is fair to say that I recruited you to Shatterpoint. I demoed the game for you, encouraged you what to pick up, taught you the game, tried to drag you out to events. And like at LVO, when you first come up to me and like, I had a comeback win with Jin, and seeing the excitement that you saw a way to win that your opponent didn't see. And then you got to tell them, you're like, this is how I'm going to win. I know that is not exactly how you delivered that information, but for the purposes of my story now, you looked across the table and you're like, Jin is going to kill Anakin or whoever it was, and is going to, this is how I'm going to take this game from you. And then you execute the plan, do it and win, and then get to tell the story. Like, there is a very special part of that experience that amplifies the gaming experience for me. And so I think that kind of falls under social, but I'm not sure that's exactly the same thing as like teaching and then seeing someone get joy from the teaching. Do you think that applies under or social? And do you think that means you have like just a little killer in you, just like a little bit?
I think it loops because it's a very social thing for me. If I had to put a thing to it though, it wouldn't be killer, it would be achiever. Because I did have a cycle for myself at LVO that I was at least not going to lose every struggle. And so to have won a whole like the game was a very like, oh, I did it. And I didn't have this like, I got him on the other player. It was a internal achievement unlocked experience of like, hey, I did it. I think we talked about this when it happened, but the reason why that experience was important to me wasn't actually because I ended up winning. It was because I had a moment where I thought I was doomed in the play, and then I thought, Omnis wouldn't accept being doomed. I'm going to think about this a little bit longer and try all of the scenarios before I declare myself the loser. And then I sat there and I thought about it, and then I thought of a way to get out of it. And so that was like it was an achievement moment for me of like not just giving up in the moment because I didn't see something immediately, and completing a game without losing. So I was like, okay, this is like, I wouldn't put it under killer because I didn't get any satisfaction out of beating my opponent. It was satisfaction out of completing internal milestones I had made for myself. So it was a very special moment for sure.
Do you think you had the vertigo experience in that game where you're like, I've got to look through all of the possible situations? Do you think you entered the zone in that moment? Do you think maybe that qualifies, or it wasn't different than most gaming for you?
I think at least in that moment, I definitely was in the zone because I definitely was fully locked into what was happening. If anyone walked, I think that an actual gonk could have shuffled past the table and I wouldn't have noticed. So I was locked in.
Okay, so all right, so you do actually enter the zone. I like kind of excited that we got to the point. But I was also going to ask you, do you think you got more joy from getting the win at the convention or being able to talk about it afterwards and how it amplified your social experience? Was the storytelling aspect of having a fun moment to relay better than the achievement part?
insightful. Absolutely it was. Because after I won, I wasn't sitting there. I like put my stuff away, thank my opponent, very nice guy. And then I was like, where's Omnis or Aubrey or Pure or Josh? I got to tell the people. The people must know.
Nice. Yeah, I feel it was a little bit. Obviously, I liked winning a GT myself. Again, I'm going to stress this every time I bring this up. It was a small GT. But I would say the joy of being able to talk about it, and maybe to a certain extent that, hey, this list idea that I've been talking about, like, worked in practice, right? And being able to kind of like talk about the list and be like, this is why I played it. And like, maybe that more people would, I guess, just pay attention to it, right? Where I think it's really easy. You know, people throw out list ideas all the time. Like if I go back to my War Machine days and I was coming into the game, I had a really hard time of knowing who I should listen to on the forums, right? Like, you know, people would say, oh, this is the way to play this thing, or like, this isn't good. But like, I have no idea who I'm talking to. I don't know enough about these people. I don't know if this is a new person. I don't know if this person's a fucking idiot. I don't know if this is the best player in the fucking world. And so it took me a good amount of time before I kind of zoned in, and I was like, these are the players that to be honest and completely fair, these are the people that I respect their opinions on. Because I felt like a lot of people were playing the faction that I wanted to play wrong. And so then when these people would say something and be like, oh, I think this is actually like really good and worth playing, I'm like, it sunk in with me, and I was like, okay, I haven't played that much. Let me dig into that further. And I think we all create this like tier list of people that we trust. And I think there's an internal goal, and maybe it falls under the achievement part, where I think everybody wants to get the prestige and respect that they're a person who the other people in the community respect their opinion. Right. And like, for example, Luke Thompson from Australia, whenever he posts something, cause I immediately, he's played some lists that were like similar to things that I was enjoying, and like also like kind of branches outside of the norm, and is very well respected in Australia and honestly across the entire community. If you haven't seen Luke Thompson's lists and stuff, you absolutely should. I love Luke, but he's an example of like when he posts something a little bit weird, I'm like, this is Luke. I should probably, you know, don't immediately discount this, where it's really easy when it's maybe someone you're like, I don't recognize this username. Like, I don't know how much thought they put into this. Is this like a random thing that they threw out? And I think a lot of people would like the kind of the achievement of going, oh, I reached a particular level of prestige in the community. And now people, when I post a list idea, people approach it with a degree of trust. And like another one is Samuel Sweeten for me. When I was first coming back to the game and I was kind of figuring out what sort of Mando list I wanted to do, and I heard that he was playing Mando and Ahsoka, and I was kind of toying around with Mando or like Luminara versus Ahsoka. And then he came and he like shared his whole thought process of why he was choosing which models for his particular version of the list. And I thought it was so insightful. And I was like, this is the kind of list that I'm enjoying, and hearing why he even though I ended up playing a slightly different version of it, I really appreciated understanding how he got to his different decisions. And so whenever I see Samuel Sweeten post a list, I'm like, I probably like this. I like the way he thinks. And so for me, I think winning was great, but it was definitely more of like, hey, will you guys respect this list idea now and not immediately discount it? And just like being able to, you know, dig into the list and my thought processes and stuff, and hopefully have more people listening to it, was more enjoyable for me than the win part. Like if I had lost to Josh, I would have been totally fine. And I don't think it would have been a drastically different level of enjoyment of the event. It was like a little bit more for winning, but it was more like the conversations and stuff that happened afterwards, which were fantastic. So I definitely see where you're coming from, is I think what I'm saying.
No, yeah, that makes sense. We both ironically want to win for social reasons. Why we're doing it and how we're getting there is drastically different, but we are united in that the trying to win isn't just about winning. It's about improving our social enjoyment of the game.
Well, so if someone's listening to this and they're kind of like, all right, Omnis and Stan, what's the moral of the story? Like, what's the point of this conversation? We're just throwing out some random terminology. I think my takeaway for myself and what I would think the good takeaway is for other people and your Jabba the Hutt cup, the takeaways should be, understanding that, like, if you're not getting as much enjoyment out of it as you want, maybe realize that you're focusing on the part that doesn't appeal to you as much. And see, if you're like me and you grew up on like WoW and EverQuest and that sort of thing, and you're like, well, I'm probably an achiever at my core. Maybe I'm not utilizing that stuff. And so you could go my route, right, of creating little achievements for yourself where you have things on your own personal internal checklist, and that brings you joy. Or it could be like, maybe you do want to work on the Longshank stuff and be like, hey, I would like to be, my goal is to, be in the top 5 for my favorite, leader, or, you want to get a track, 10 games with all of these different primaries or whatever it is maybe like something like that is useful to you. And, or inversely, if you're a socializer at heart and you've been mostly playing online on TTS, maybe you will get more joy if you like find a way to like get some of those social experiences. And so I think there's all sorts of different ways you could like weave this into the conversation, but I would think about those sort of things and think about if there's a way that you can like refocus your efforts to be actually like hitting home to who you are, like deep down. Sid, do you have any, kind of a wrap up moral of the story thoughts?
I think that this is kind of a topic that we keep coming back to as a podcast of like, know thyself, where everything about your life and everything about minis gaming will be better if you slow down and connect with the why of why you're doing things, and then force the people around you to do the same thing so that you're all kind of getting what you want out of the game and out of your experiences. And like, this is something that we're all doing in our free time, like to enrich our lives. So if we get too stuck down one thing and it just starts feeling like it's slipping away, it's good to just be like, okay, I have lost sight of things a little bit. Let's take a step back, evaluate why we're doing what we're doing, and then maybe things will get better. Because I know that at least for me, evaluating like when I'm playing, like how anxious I get when I play, like why am I getting so anxious? Is it because I'm not meeting one of the needs that I have in playing miniatures gaming, or is it because I'm worried I'm the social aspect? I'm worried I'm not meeting someone else's like need for the game. And so like examining that and seeing where it takes you about like this is a fun thing that we do for the love of it. And so trying to work through your feelings about it and any anxieties. And it's like hard because you don't just know these things. If we just knew them, we wouldn't need to talk about it. But so I think it's a good self check-in, especially to have right before kind of spring and, everyone gets full into anything out of the slumber of winter.
Well, and so I'm going to tell an anecdote from our interactions, and you could tell me if I need to cut this out afterwards. But we had been kind of talking about potentially doing a team event locally. And when I was first kind of pitching the idea, there was this point where we were like, should we split Rarely Reserved into 2 different teams and have you and I on different teams? And I was like, no. I want a Rarely Reserved team. And as we kind of like dug into it deeper, it seemed like your true worry was basically like, Omnis is too much of a killer. I'm going to let him down because I'm not that much of a killer. And as we were talking about it, and I was like, I'm looking at this more from the social gamer side. And once we kind of talked about that, you're like, oh, well, if that's the primary goal, then fuck yes, I'm in. And so I think that there's also that element of like understanding what your teammates or what your fellow people in the community and such want. So do I have to cut this part out?
No, that I think that anyone who knows either of us would absolutely understand that conversation happening.
Yeah. But, yeah, overall, I think it's very interesting. And I guess one thing that I did want to like work into this is that also been watching stuff and researching stuff about, gaming addiction and how, you know, the basic, you accomplish something in a game and then you achieve something, you know, whether kill a monster, complete a level or whatever, and then you get a dopamine hit. But you can't just keep doing that same cycle over and over again. Eventually your brain is kind of like used to it and it needs like a bigger high. And you eventually get sick of it. That's why like eventually you're like, I think I'm probably done with this game. Right. And then you take a break, your brain goes back to normal. And then eventually you want to start it back up again and go back and chase those highs. But and so like my point there is that sometimes when you're hitting those lulls, one, you may just need the break. You need the chance to kind of like let your brain reset. But inversely, it can be like, you know what? If you've been too much of a killer, right? And you're just focusing on winning, that, you know, you can only win so many games and then like the dopamine hit is not going to be the same. And you're going to chase something else. You're going to chase winning a tournament. You're going to chase being a world champion. You're going to chase something else to achieve that higher level dopamine hit. And I think if you're in a spot where you're struggling with, you're like, I'm not feeling the same joy, which is the drugs hitting your brain for the stuff that happens in the game, you can go, wait a second. Would I get joy from any of these other things? And there may be a point you're like, all right, you're the big fish in your local community. You're crushing everyone. Maybe you do an achievement and go, how do I feel if I got all of my favorite teams painted? Or maybe you have them painted, but you really have been thinking about going back and like touching up their bases. And you're like, I want to do something a little bit fancier with their bases. Or any of those things. I get a fucking dopamine hit when I reorganize my fucking cases and stuff. Like I get the nerd organization dopamine hit for sure. And so like, I do think that you can kind of go, okay, if you understand like the brain chemistry to a certain extent, you're like, all right, this drug is not hitting me the same way. You know, are there other aspects of this that I enjoy? And like I'm excited to see what the 4-person Shatterpoint version is at Adepticon. We don't know anything about it besides there's a 4-player version. And so that can be such a nice change of pace. I remember having that for MCP where it would be like, all right, I do kind of like need a little bit of break, but I love MCP. And then you just played like the social separation anxiety game format. And you're like, holy shit, was this a fun refresher, right? Where it was a good hangout experience and it was just different enough that it hits the brain a little bit different. But, all right. Any other closing thoughts before we wrap this fine episode?
No, I think, it was a good topic. I think I also have some stuff to think about. So that's nice.
Yep, that's the goal. Well, listeners, I hope our little amateur psychology jumps. I did have like a good conversation with Dizzard today about our Hawthorne Effect episode, and he ended up posting some links in the Rogue Support Discord of some of the things that he's been researching and stuff lately. So all very interesting. I think understanding our joy, certainly helps. But, well, how do we rarely reserved Lego Star Wars? How does that even work, Sin?
Well, being, rarely reserved is mechanically about holding off on using a character. So I think that Lego Star Wars does not reserve at all because it's all about changing out, playing every character through everything, every moment. So I'm going to say it is rarely reserved.
So what about 7-year-old Sin? Is 7-year-old Sin rarely reserved, or was she commonly reserved back when she was playing Lego Star Wars?
I think that I don't remember who I was. I'm gonna say I've probably always been the way that I am. So I'm gonna say that tiny version of me was just as I am, except I didn't have all the tattoos.
All right, you heard it here. Mouse droid-sized Sin has always been rarely reserved. Later, nerds.
Comm signal lost.